Welcome to the program. Sri Lanka's humanitarian crisis continues, with over 240,000 displaced civilians remaining in overcrowded camps in the north. The rains over the past few weeks have jolted authorities into speeding up the sluggish start to the 180-day plan, but still, the numbers resettled have been inadequate in terms of reducing congestion. In the meantime, opposition politicians have been fighting for entry into the camps, while the government has staunchly stuck by its policy of limited access. Our first story this week gives you a closer look.
Among those who have been fortunate enough to go from the displaced people's camp in Vaunia is a group of Hindu clergymen. They were allowed to leave the Manic Farm premises on the 26th of August to take up residence with family members or relatives. According to the government agent of Vaunia, over 500 Hindu priests, 6 Catholic priests and some nuns have been released so far, with a further 220 awaiting departure. But this still leaves more than 200,000 displaced people in Vaunia's Manic Farm, the most overcrowded of the many IDP centres, comprising 6 separate zones which are congested beyond their capacity. The heavy rains from 2 weeks ago, signalling the upcoming monsoons, worsened conditions that were already far from ideal. The plight of the displaced was highlighted by the Parliamentary Group for Human Rights at a press conference held recently in Colombo.
We strongly feel that as elected representatives of the people of Sri Lanka, that we have a duty and we have a moral obligation to protect and to work hard to see that the human rights of the citizens of Sri Lanka being protected.
The Parliamentary Group for Human Rights consists of 37 opposition parliamentarians who were all equally outraged that the government had denied them access to the camps, in spite of several requests to the Ministry of Defence.
As you all know that the opposition parliamentarians of Sri Lanka has not been allowed to visit these IDP camps. We have been repeatedly requesting from the Ministry of Defence to grant us the permission to visit these IDP camps. Unfortunately, all our requests have been turned down by the Ministry of Defence, and the Ministry of Defence has informed us that due to security reasons that they cannot allow us to visit. We wanted to visit these IDP camps in order to see what we could provide to these Sri Lankan citizens.
In respect of the displaced people in the Vaunia region, government has been coming out with 2 reasons. One is the landmines. The government state, most of the area in the Vaunia region are mined. The other reason is that trained LTD cadres are living among the displaced people. We totally reject both these opinions put out by the government. We are not prepared to buy the story of landmines as well as the LTD cadres living among the civilians. We are aware the LTD cadres who have been living among the people in the displaced camps are already identified. They are separated, taken away, and they are being rehabilitated. We welcome the government's move on this score, because international law permits government to separate trained armed cadres from civilians and rehabilitate them. We support them. We will support this move.
In its defence, the government has cited many reasons for both lack of access to camps and for the delay in resettlement procedures. One of those reasons is the security factor, and this was once again reinforced by the Minister for Human Rights and Disaster Management, who raised this concern at a seminar in Colombo.
Good morning. We have to take utmost care in permitting even limited freedom of movement, as the risk exists of LTT cadres posing as civilian IDPs and entering the general population. This is a chance we cannot afford to take. The decision was not taken lightly, but rather by a careful balancing of the rights of IDPs against those of the rest of the population, especially given the LTT's propensity to cause maximum carnage among the civilian population by launching terrorist acts.
From winning the war to winning the peace, and
Those who were
organized by the
harmed and
Regional Centre for
displaced
Strategic
villagers
Studies,
who are
gave the Minister
elderly,
an opportunity to inform
are
the media
pregnant
once again
or lactating
of the
mothers
monumental
or
task at
children.
hand and the government's commitment towards resettling the displaced people in the north.
The goal is the return of IDPs to the areas in which they originally resided. This process requires ensuring that these areas must be rendered safe, free of mines and other unexploded ordnance. The areas of return must be cleared of the vast caches of weapons that our forces are recovering on a day-to-day basis. To facilitate this process, basic infrastructure must be put in place, which will sustain the restored communities.
There is no doubt that the government has a massive task to carry through in the coming months. Although nobody is denying this, the government has often been criticized for its lack of transparency and its tendency to deny the displaced, the general public, and the media the right to adequate information about the real conditions in the camps and also resettlement procedures. For those still in the camps who have suffered so much already, their ordeal seems far from over. I spoke with Dr. Vinya Aryaratna, head of Sarvodaya, one of the largest local humanitarian organizations in the country, to find out his views on the ground situation. Your organization, Sarvodaya, has been one that has had access to the camp steadily at a time when access is quite hard to come by. Can you give me an idea of the ground situation as it stands right now?
Yes, actually the Sarvodaya activities were quite easy to start at the beginning because we already had a presence in the area because we have been engaged in various development and relief activities even before the displacement took place in Vaunia. So therefore it was not a matter of we having access after the event, but we just extended our normal services to respond to an emergency situation. At the moment, we are serving about 60,000 people out of these 240,000 odd IDPs who are in the Manik farm. In terms of the conditions, you can't give one straight answer whether the conditions are good or bad. It depends on the zone that you are looking at. There are zones which have been set up from January, which have better facilities and conform to international humanitarian standards. Then there are other zones, because of the sheer numbers, the services are not still up to the standard. For example, the ratio of toilets to number of individuals is still not up to the mark. We need about 15,000 toilets, but we only have about 10,000 at the moment. So there are serious deficiencies. Then also with the current expectations of the rains coming, then the preparedness is still inadequate. So we are facing great challenges. So the facilities and the services range from quite satisfactory to quite unsatisfactory.
So there have been several pressing needs that aid workers have identified. Some say that congestion is the worst problem. Others say that the conditions in the camps generally have to be improved. In your opinion, what is the most urgent, pressing problem at the moment?
The basic needs are being met. The quality of those services have to be improved, no question about it. But I think the large numbers, even with so much work done by the government and humanitarian organizations, it's just not possible to maintain high quality services for this number of people. So decongestion is important. People have to move out to smaller camps or to go back to their original places of residence. That has to happen. But there are other pressing needs. For example, still the family reunification process is slow. So we can attend to these problems because these are very humane things and urgent in terms of the emotional and psychological well-being of the people. So, of course, efforts are there by the government and various organizations to reunite families or identify where their other family members are, because they are scattered all over. Some
But
are
is
in
it
hospital.
happening fast enough?
No, I think it can be improved very much. I think this is an urgent need that has to happen. And also, even if you cannot reunite, at least sharing of the information makes a big difference. If they know that their relations are in this hospital or in this camp, that will make a difference. Then I think it's also fair by the people if they know what is the general time frame that they can go back to their homes. So the government has come up with a 180-day plan and things are happening, and I hope that process gets expedited and the people, they have a right to know.
Okay, but now the government has to deal with this massive task of resettlement, and according to the government, they have to balance these two concerns, the defense concern and the humanitarian concern. And these two usually clash because restriction of movement, that's all because of security reasons. How do you think this should be handled or balanced in a more
Yes, I think there are ways of balancing. I think there are genuine concerns, because we have also witnessed ourselves that there are elements who have really been very sort of detrimental to the well-being of the people, who have probably done atrocities in the past to civilians. So there is a security element there. But I think that can be expedited if that process is made transparent. This is what is happening and this is how the judicial process is taking place. So we know that certain individuals are identified and detained and they are in camps, and once the judicial process takes place, it's a very legal, within the law process. But that has to be expedited, because you can't just say that security delays things indefinitely.
So now the government has planned to resettle thousands within the coming weeks. Do you know anything about this program, how it's progressing?
Yes, the government has identified certain areas where people can move without much difficulty, where landmine problem is not there, where people have been living until very recent times, where they are confident of the infrastructure support and security and so on. So we are made to understand that people have been now resettled in areas in Mana, we know, and we are also involved in that process. In Jaffna, people have been moved. We don't know exactly the areas and the numbers, but altogether, also in the eastern province, people have been sent back. So altogether, about 20,000 to 30,000 people are being settled right now. But I believe that within the next few weeks, before the rain starts, at least 100,000 people have to be moved out, not necessarily resettled, but relocated.
Do you see that happening?
I think there is a commitment, but we have to wait and see how fast it happens, because it will be impossible for us to provide the services to such a large number when the monsoon rains come.
Okay, and finally, what do you think people in the south can do? Because it's not only the government's responsibility, it's not only humanitarian workers' responsibility. What do you think people in the south can do to help these people?
We are a caring nation, but right now the unfortunate thing is people don't get news about what's really happening. Sometimes for various reasons, news are getting manipulated by various parties for their own vested interest. But I think if the people know what the real situation, then they will find on their own ways to connect with these people. I think the government also has to exploit this goodwill of the people in the south, create opportunities, creates avenues for that concern and compassion for the people in the south to connect with the people in the north, particularly those who are in the IDP camps. And Sarvodhi is doing through its own mechanisms, but it can be scaled up. That way I think we can lay a very strong foundation for reconciliation, because that's the only way that we can move forward as one country.
Although Dr. Aryaratna admits that the government has only been able to resettle around 30,000 people so far, he still hopes to see 100,000 civilians relocated within the next month or so. With the impending monsoons clouding the horizon, He believes that now is the time to act. We're going in for a break right now, but when we return, we move on to the question of inclusion and how information communication technology, or ICT, can provide answers. Welcome back. Disability has always been a factor that has set those suffering from it apart from others, not only in society, but also when it comes to the job market. The lack of job opportunities for disabled people in turn make them even more dependent on others for survival. However, this does not have to be the case. Our next story takes a look at how some initiatives are attempting to break this vicious cycle by using ICT to improve the employability of Sri Lanka's visually impaired community. Udita Rupasinghe is just like any other 30-year-old. He works, goes for classes, spends time with his family and in his garden, although he cannot see it.
මම වයස 10 දී පමණ ටික ටික මගේ පෙනීම දුර්වල වෙන්න පටන් ගත්තා. ඊට පස්සේ වයස 18 වෙනකොට මගේ සම්පූර්ණ පෙනීම නැති වෙලා ගියා. දැනට මම කරන්නේ හැන්ඩ්ලූම් අයිටම්ස් සේල්ස් කිරීම තමයි.
Udita has recently taken up a course in information communication technology, which has been designed for the visually impaired. He feels that competency in ICT will improve his chances of employability and bring him on par with the rest of society.
ICT course එක ඇත්ත වශයෙන්ම අපිට වැදගත් වෙනවා. නූතන ලෝකයේ තාක්ෂණයත් එක්ක අපිට සම්බන්ධ වෙන නම් ITC course එක ඇත්ත වශයෙන්ම උපකාර වෙනවා. මෙම අපේ තියෙන ආබාධයක් පමණක් ඒක අපේ ජීවිතේ කොටසක් කරගන්න ඕනේ නැහැ. අනිත් සාමාන්‍ය අයත් එක්ක මේ සාමාන්‍ය විදිහට ගැටෙන මට්ටමටම අපි ඉන්න ඕනේ කියන එක තමයි මම අයට කියන්නේ.
Udita is optimistic about the boost that the ICT training will give both to his business venture and also his wider knowledge and awareness of the world.
මගේ තත්ත්වය ඇත්තටම වෙනසක් වෙනවා. මොකද දැන් මම මේ ව්‍යාපාරය කරගෙන යනකොට මට පුළුවන් ඒ IT course එක follow up කරාට පස්සේ අන්තර්ජාලය සමග සම්බන්ධ වෙලා වෙන මට කර හැකි ව්‍යාපාර මොනවද කියලා මේ බලන්න. එතකොට මේක වුණත් මට ජාත්‍යන්තර මට්ටමින් ඒ කියන්නේ අපනයන කිරීමේ හැකියාවට වුණත් යන්න පුළුවන්. ඒ දේ අර මම තොරතුරු මේ තාක්ෂණෙත් එක්ක මේ සම්බන්ධ නොවුනොත් මට ඒ දේ නැති වෙනවා. විශ්වාසවලට ගොඩක් පුහුණුවල් ලැබුණට වෘත්තිවල වලට සම්බන්ධ කරගැනීමේදී ආයතන ගොඩක් නෙගටිව් පැත්තෙන් බලනවා. මොකද ඒක කරන්න පුළුවන්ද කියන දේ මුලින්ම ඒ ආයතන දැනුවත් කරන්න ඕනේ මේ අයගෙන් කොහොමද අපි වැඩ සේවයක් ලබා ගන්න කොහොමද කියන එක.
There are a few initiatives that have begun to do just that. The ICT training program for visually impaired, established by the Employees Federation, was created to help people work around their disability and become as productive as others.
We are extremely happy that the EFC Employers Network on Disability is able to commence this training program on ICT to the visually handicapped and thereby expand the opportunities available to a wider section of our community.
The issue of greater inclusion of people with disabilities in the workforce is indeed an issue very important for the ILO, globally as well as here in Sri Lanka. People with disabilities can succeed. They are capable, they are talented, and they are able to work if they are given an opportunity and appropriate training. They can become valuable employees instead of poor people living off welfare packages.
Udita is trained in ICT at the Employees Federation by Manik Gunaratna, herself a visually impaired person. Currently working with over 50 students, she feels that the lack of ICT training is a major obstacle for people like herself when seeking employment.
The biggest problem is lack of knowledge in IT skills, that is information and communication technology. That's why we started this project. It's named ICT for VIP, that is information and communication technology for visually impaired persons. When you are in school or in the university, someone will help you to create your own document or read a cited book. But when you are working in an organization, you have to do your own work. You have to create your own document, with the use of email and internet. You have to communicate with other people in the organization or maybe the outside the organization. So to do all that and to be equally capable as a sighted person, IT skills is a must. You must develop ICT skills for visually impaired persons. I think that's the area that we are developing.
Well, I think for anyone, not just a blind person, that computers is an essential part of education. And now, especially these days, most jobs require some knowledge of IT, because like everything is, almost everything is IT oriented. And yeah, it's an enjoyable course to follow, and especially now. It's not like those days. Now most things are IT oriented, and everyone must have some knowledge of computers.
It is programs like this one that give those like Udita a fighting chance at living an independent life and ensuring that his disability does not set him apart from the rest.
මේ තත්ත්වෙන්න උදව් වුණේ එකක් තමුන්ගේ ආත්ම විශ්වාසය තියෙන්න ඕනේ. මොකද තමුන්ට බාධකයක් ආවත් ඒ බාධකේ මැඩලගෙන සාර්ථක භාවයට පත් වෙන්න ඕනේ කියන හිතේ ආත්ම ශක්තිය කියන දේ හොඳටම තියෙන්න ඕනේ.
We just saw how ICT can be used to bridge gaps between the visually impaired community and the rest of society. In our final story this week, we take a look at a trio of scouts who are also attempting to bridge gaps, this time between those in the south and those in the north, by walking the length of Sri Lanka, from Dondra Head to Point Pidru. Take a look.
Relaxing during an overnight stopover in Colombo, 3 active scouts show little sign of fatigue. But they have put behind them about 160 kilometers over 6 days of walking, and their journey is not yet over. The 3 scouts have undertaken a 600-kilometer peace walk that began in the southern town of Dondra and will end in Point Pedro in the north. Organized by the Madhara branch of the Sri Lanka Scouts Association, the 3 young men have agreed to walk the distance, stopping at significant towns on the way, on a peace-building mission to show solidarity and unity between the south and the north. They are estimated to take 22 days in total. Here they are about to set off on the Colombo-Kurunegala stretch. The Madhara District Scout leader, Kasun Shanaka, President Scout Prasad Manjula, Rover Scout Kanta Gunawardana, ambassadors of peace, eager to do their bit to build peace and bridges between communities.
ඇත්තම මේක අපි දකුණේ ඉඳලා ගෙනියන්නේ උතුරට සාමයේ පණිවිඩයක්. ලෝතුම් බාලදක්ෂ ව්‍යාපාරයේ තිබෙනා වූ බාලදක්ෂ පොරොන්දුව වසර 100කට අධික කාලයක් පුරා පැවතගෙන යනවා. ඒ පොරොන්දුව තමයි අපි ගෙනියන්නේ දකුණේ ඉඳලා උතුරේ අපේ සහෝදර ජනතාවට. අපේ මූලිකම බලාපොරොත්තුව සිංහල, දෙමළ, මුස්ලිම් බර්ගර් කියන සියලුම ජාතීන් එක ජාතියක් හොඩියක් යටතේ එකම ජාතියක් බවට පත් වේවා කියන එක තමයි මේ ගමනෙන් අපි සියලුම දෙනාගේ හදවත් වලට එකතු කරන්න හදන්නේ.
අපිට මේ එන ගමනේදී මහජන ප්‍රතිචාර නම් ඉහළ අන්දමින් තියෙනවා. අපිට බාධාවකට තිබුණේ ගොඩක් හරිය වැස්ස තමයි. වැස්ස නිසා අපිට ගොඩක් අවස්ථාවල් වල මේ ප්‍රමාද වෙන්න හේතුවක් සිද්ධ වුණා. අපි පේදුරුතුඩුවට ගිහිල්ලා අපේ බාධක්ෂ පොරොන්දු තුන තමයි අපි පේදුරුතුඩුවට අරගෙන යන්නේ. එහෙ ඉන්න බාධක්ෂයන් සමග ඒ වගේ මෙහි ඉන්න ජනතාව සමග අපේ මේ සහෝදරත්වයේ බැම්ම තහවුරු කර ගැනීම තමයි අපේ බලාපොරොත්තුව.
Hopefully, the rains will not prove to be too much of an obstacle over the next 16 days.
There are those in the south who are eager to build bridges with those in the north. This peace walk was just one example. If you know of any others or if you have any comments, please let us know. That's all we have time for today. Until next week, thanks for watching.